All right, folks, welcome back to the Be the Bright podcast presented by Ridge Supply. My name is Matt Hawkins. This is Jordan Spoon, the guy behind our Arsenal account. And our special guest today is none other than Ian Boswell. Welcome, fellas.
Thanks for having us. Well, I guess
Glad
for
to
me,
be
I'm
on.
sure Jordan's on here regularly, so.
Yep. Hadn't missed one yet.
So I'm not going to do a silly intro. I want to know who is Boz, because I know a lot of things. And how would you describe yourself to those if people don't know who you are? So a lot of people are going to know who you are, but let's say somebody doesn't know who you are.
Yeah. So I am 29 years old. My name is Ian Pierce Boswell. I grew up out in Bend, Oregon. Both of my parents were endurance athletes. My dad raced professional triathlon. My mom dabbled in marathons and mountain biking. And I guess growing up in a town like Bend, I was kind of always drawn to and exposed to endurance sports. So from a pretty young age, I guess when you look at kids now, they're learning how to ride. Well, you have kids, you would know this. They're learning how to ride bikes much younger because they have these little Strider bikes. But I think when I was 7, I first learned how to ride a bike without training wheels. And from then on, I really fell in love with riding my bike. And through middle school, high school, I played all sorts of other sports. I have a younger brother, Austin, and we were both extremely competitive. 2.5 years between us, so we were always, whether it was basketball, cycling, hide and seek, anything we did was competitive. So I think my competitive
hide
nature,
and seek. That sounds awesome.
Oh, I mean, who can stay out there longer? Everything we did, was a competition, and we kind of pushed each other to be better and faster and stronger. And I think that kind of competitive nature within cycling, which, I pursued a career in cycling for, I guess, kind of ongoing today, but I really fell in love with cycling. Started racing BMX when I was, I guess, 8, probably the year after I learned how to ride a bike. And my dad, being a former cyclist and triathlete, tricked out my little sweet GT Mini. My dad made it super, alloy spokes and nipples. It was awesome.
Stoke level was 100. That's
it was cool because you'd win a trophy every weekend, and had just this box of trophies. And subsequently, those trophies then became trophies for races we did around the neighborhood. And we had a little Tour de Saginaw, the road I grew up on in Oregon. We had an old yellow Winning Club magazine that my dad got from being a subscriber to the magazine. And so we once I started watching the tour, it was like we did our own Tour de France around our neighborhood. And I just really fell in love with cycling. And just kind of from there, we can dive into it more, but just progressed and kind of kept going up the stages of the domestic, scene, and then eventually over to Europe, where I ultimately wanted to be.
Do you think that motors, like world-class motors, do you think they're inherited in a way? I mean, obviously you got to train to to get to the highest levels, but did you know early on that you were kind of gifted at it?
I mean, I guess maybe I probably assumed it because, both my parents came from an endurance background. So I mean, potentially there was some, genetics there, kind of at an early age, but I think just being exposed to it at a young age and like I said, racing BMX and doing tandem rides with my dad and, always having bikes with us when we were, going on a camping trip or wherever we went. Definitely helps, but I think you can, I guess the personal engine can be developed, but I think it was more just being exposed to it at such a young age and kind of, as you both know, cycling is a very unique sport when it comes to, so many facets, from equipment to just, everything involved. So I think just like having that, ability to be able to kind of see inside what it was like and kind of what it took. And like I said, my dad, coming from a professional triathlon background, he knew kind of what the actual work ethic took to do that. And so it wasn't, it was easier, I guess, for me to, kind of figure out at a young age what actual training was rather than just,
for sure,
thinking what it's, Oh, go ahead, Jordan.
What age did you finally see that this might work? This might be something you could actually go do or pursue?
Well, when I was, how old was I? 12 maybe. So there's a race in Bend, the Cascade Cycling Classic, that was for a long time, like the longest running stage race in the US. And on the last Sunday, there was a crit, and they always had a kids race. And I think when I was like 10 and 11, I signed up and I was beat by another junior in Bend, Brian Jorgensen. I remember him very well. And he beat me 2 years in a row.
Shout out to Brian, wherever you are, buddy.
Yeah. And his dad, was a cyclist as well. So he had, I'm not going to say we had nice bikes, but he had a road bike, and I was on, I think a mountain bike the first year. And then eventually when I was 12, I was able to fit onto my mom's steel Olmo bike that my dad had painted. It was like a baby pink with white and then like faded into a baby blue. Kind of looks like some of the socks in your background, to be honest. It was very, very retro. And I think when I was 12, I won that crit, and that just like, I finally beat Brian Jorgensen, and I was, that kind of really just like ingrained this, like, oh, I can do this. And, thankfully the road racing scene in Oregon at the time was really strong, so you've met Jacob Raffy at the Peach and Falfondo a couple of years ago. And there was a really good group of road racers in Oregon, and the racing scene in Oregon was super strong at the time. My dad got back into racing. My younger brother started racing. My mom started racing. So I think just having that support around me, but also, winning definitely helps you kind of stay involved and stay, engaged in what you're doing, rather than, showing up to these races and getting lapped in crits. And I was a young developer as well. I think when I was 14, I went to nationals the first time. I think I was like already, 6'1", and
crazy.
Someone we both know.
14.
Gavin Mannion, who was out at the Fondo as well. He's been crushing it this year with rally. And he was tiny. I mean, he's still a small guy, but he had, I think I lapped him 3 or 4 times in the national championship criteria. And it was just like, and it wasn't, again, kind of getting back to skill, it was also a matter of that I, just developed early and had strength that other young kids didn't have. So it's easier to move up through the, kind of through the ranks if you're an early developer. But on the contrary, Gavin really had to learn how to race a bike, is where I could just use strength for so long to get to the front of the bunch, or, there's a hill, I better go to the front. And Gavin really had to learn how to draft and use the bunch and tactics. So once he physically kind of matured and caught up to all of us, he had like an upper, edge, because he was like, I actually know how to race a bike, and I'm not just relying completely on strength.
Yeah. I asked that question too, because and one of the reasons that we got to know each other, the long story, but I was from Central Virginia, and I got to watch Ben King start riding, and was there with him on the group rides every week, twice a week when he was 14. And his dad is a very good cyclist, like a Cat 1, crushing guy, and his uncle as well. And so he had these 2 mentors for sure, but he was really raw at 14 is when he just kind of picked it up.
Yeah.
The next year, when we started those rides up, he was the fastest person at 15. He was the fastest person out of everyone. And it was like shocking, but part of it was just seeing somebody coming into their natural, whatever their motor was, and starting to learn it. It sounds like you were even a couple years ahead of that as far as riding, competitively before that. But I just always wonder, because I swam my whole life. And so I don't have parents that had great genetics, and I developed a motor, whatever motor I do have, it's a busted down, broken motor now, but I swam my whole life. So I was developing this engine, and I always just wonder, guys who make it to the top level, if you just know, like if you know that you've got this extra thing, early. And it sounds like you did. It sounds like you were a man among boys. I mean, I would still be giving Gavin a hard time for lapping him right now. I think you should be.
Well, I still can't grow a beard, but and I think
I can join the not growing a beard club. All I can get is this mustache I've got right now. That's it.
Yeah, I did it a couple times during quarantine, and my wife's like, "Yeah, you need to it looks like you don't know it's there, and you just forgot to shave."
I can relate to that too.
But it's interesting kind of thinking about that, because, I still help out some junior riders today. And I think just with social media and kind of the ability to like see what the pro life style is. I don't want to, say that, I mean, there's plenty of young riders out there and athletes that really push hard, but I guess I was in an era when like I only saw the people directly around me, what they were doing.
Right.
It's like just that. I mean, I guess looking back on it now, like, the drive, and I just did a podcast actually today with Pete Kenna, who is a teammate of mine at Team Sky, and just the drive that it takes. And it's like nothing else matters. Like I would get home from school, I would run home from the bus so I could be on, the bus got, I got to my house at 3:15, and by 3:20, I was on my bike out riding, just because I knew I needed to get all the daylight in, just like that. So of course it's, talent is not both, it's not just physical, it's also, mental. And like, what do you actually want to get out of it? And I think my drive to just like get out there and push myself and really love it. That's probably at that age is probably almost more impactful than actual maybe physical talent, just the desire to get out there and, to do it at every possible moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I listened to your podcast the other day of the 2010 Tour de l'Avenir.
Yeah.
Did I say it right?
You did.
Oh,
Yes.
Yes. And because I got to be around Ben when he was coming up through all that, and then I had moved away down here, and I've been here for the last like 14 years. But I watched that whole Livestrong alumni class go through a lot of their pro journeys, that some of you guys have moved on to other things, but I do think, and I heard you mentioning it, that you guys are really in this golden era of domestic talent that came post postal time, but it was real. I mean, we had this really good group of super talented guys, and it's a whole nother story, but it is a shame that we didn't have some really nationalistic team that put everybody together, at the world tour level. It would have been amazing to see because everyone got scattered around and did their thing. But that crew is just incredible. I still am in awe at the path that everybody's been on,
Yeah. I mean, and that's like, you kind of hit the nail on the head right there with, there was this crop from 89 to 92, you have in the Finney, Ben King, Lawson Craddock, myself, Gavin, Nate Brown, all
Justin,
these, Justin,
all those
Justin,
guys, everyone's still crushing it,
Yeah. And, there was at that time, thanks to the Livestrong team, there was a team for us to kind of go to after juniors. And because we all, junior racing is so difficult to have, really a national wide team. Hot Tubes does it now. The Lux team, has something similar. But then we all came together at Livestrong. You look at every top American junior. I guess a couple people went to Cal Giant, Talansky, and those guys. But a lot of us went to Livestrong. But then there was a small connection between Livestrong and Radio Shack for a while. But pretty quickly, they were so international that they weren't exclusively taking riders from Livestrong. But then when I went to Sky and just seeing the organization that British Cycling had, that kids went through the British Academy, and then they're almost not guaranteed to go to Sky, but they had this kind of natural pathway, and the team and the coaches and the directors all knew these riders from when they were 14. So for the riders, it was a really comfortable transition from junior to under 23 to pro, and they're almost nothing really changed other than the level at which they're riding. Everything else around them stayed the same, and that's never really been the case for North American riders. We all go join a foreign team. There is Slipstream organization and I guess BMC, but they had such an international kind of influence that it wasn't like there was a core group of people that stayed together from a young age.
And we certainly can get into more of the world tour life here in the next episode, but it's just been, for me personally, being not a couple years older than you guys, but old enough to really watch it. And then also to know one person at the time that was actually living that dream and on that trajectory and doing things that like when Ben won the national championships and just these unexpected things and seeing it all happen was crazy, because my generation is I'm the Lance generation, and so when I was in my early 20s and mid 20s, that's when all that was happening. And that's when I was inspired to like race and, and get more into it. But when I was a kid, my story with cycling is just that the Tour de Trump and the Tour de Pont came through our town when, Greg LeMond and Lance were dueling it out. And it was just bonkers that there was a huge stage race that went through my little country town in Central Virginia. But that's how we got exposed to cycling. And most kids, even today, like they just never, ever experience it, and you're lucky you had, you kind of were born into it too, in a lot of ways, like into a scene,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of, again, touched on a really important point that a lot of people who do get into cycling, it's because a big event, passes nearby and they go and see. I mean, you look at, in the Southeast, you look at the crit racing and people, how cool is it if you're 12, 13 years old to go watch, Athens Twilight? You're like, wow, that's awesome and crazy. Like I would love to do that. And it's, road racing in the US is definitely taken a hit. And, there are more races that are kind of going away year after year, which is scary in the sense, like, where does the next generation come from if they're not exposed to it? But that's kind of where, where this whole movement of gravel comes in. And, these events are in a way almost more accessible for someone who's just getting into the sport, whether they're, a junior or someone in their, mid 20s or a master. It's like, you can sign up for this event and you're like, hey, I'm just going to try to ride 100 miles. That's like a huge challenge. And then you do it. And the next year, like, hey, I actually want to try to finish under 5 hours. And then before you know it, you're, knee deep and, living the cycling lifestyle.
It's not hard to do.
No, it's not.
Well, Ian, thanks for getting stuck in for this first episode. This is our episode 36, I think.
36.
We're going to be right back with more with Ian Boswell and Mr. Jordan Spoon. We're going to dive into some world tour versus real life factoids. So, Ian, thanks for being here, buddy.
Thank you.
The beeper just went off.